now. She is the co-chair of President Trump's transition team, Tulsi Gabbard. Will you think about going into the administration? I think you are a phenomenal asset in so many ways that I know that people may not know. And I've got to imagine that there is a position in this administration for you. Are you interested?
This is up to President Trump. Obviously, he's looking to assemble a team right now. If he asks me to serve in a position where I feel I can be effective to help him carry out his objectives, of course, I'd be honored to do that.
Let me ask you about, women were lied to about abortion in a whole variety of ways. Old people were lied about Donald Trump taking away Social Security and Medicare. The Harris-Walz ticket supported gender-affirming care for minors without parental consent. They support sex change operation and amnesty for illegal immigrants. And then they say they care about women's rights, but they were completely silent on all of the women the dozens of them that were murdered by their unvetted illegal immigrants, the dozens that were raped by those people or accused of it. They don't seem to care about the hundreds of Americans victims of violent crimes by unvetted illegal immigrants. How important were these topics to voters in your view? How big an impact did it have on this race?
Yeah, Sean, that's one of the things that really gave me hope in seeing the results of this election is the American people, the vast majority of the American people didn't fall for the lies and the propaganda that they were pushing out, and they saw through them. They saw that in Kamala Harris and in the Democrat elite and those who were backing and propping her up in the propaganda media and big tech and so forth, they saw that these are people who don't really care about the American people, that Kamala Harris was saying things that she thought would convince voters to support her. Whereas when you look at President Trump, throughout the campaign, he delivered the same message everywhere he went, regardless of the demographic of people that he was talking to. He wasn't trying to curate his message to tell people just what he thought they wanted to hear. And he was addressing very real issues that the American people are most concerned about. And so in the result of this election, we saw, of course, a vast majority of Americans placing their trust and confidence in President Trump, delivering a mandate and rejecting Kamala Harris's agenda of open borders, of censorship, of free speech, of freedom of religion, of crime in our communities, her agenda of continuing to wage stupid, costly, and unnecessary wars that are counterproductive to the interests of the American people, and instead embraced President Trump's vision and promise, rejecting the neocons and warmongers of Washington, promising to end wars and prevent World War III and nuclear war, bring our economy back to life, lower the cost of living, and make life better for the American people. So this is a clear mandate that the American people have delivered in this election. And I hope these entrenched politicians in Washington are paying attention, or they will see themselves potentially in the next election without a job.
Tulsi, thanks for all you've done in this whole, campaign. You've been amazing. I appreciate it. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.